I looked my husband dead in the eye as he smirked across the courtroom. "I'm taking half your millions, including your grandmother's estate," Bradley announced like he'd already won the lottery. But what he didn't know. I had a secret that would destroy him completely. My name is Akira Tanaka. I'm 45 years old. And I never thought I'd be sitting in this Nashville courtroom watching my husband of 5 years try to steal everything I'd worked for my entire life. Bradley sat there in his expensive suit, one I'd paid for, of course, looking like he owned the world. His golden hair slicked back in that way that used to charm me. Now it just made me sick. "Your Honor," his attorney continued, "my client is entitled to half of all marital assets, including the substantial inheritance Mrs. Tanaka received during their marriage." The courtroom was packed. Reporters, spectators, all of them calculating how much Bradley would walk away with. Some were probably thinking, "Lucky guy, marrying rich." Judge Richardson, a stern woman with steel-gray hair, reviewed the paperwork with a neutral expression. 20 years on the bench meant she'd seen every trick in the book. But she hadn't seen what I was about to reveal. Bradley turned to flash me what he thought was a victorious smile. The audacity made my blood boil. This was the same man who used to bring me coffee in bed. Who claimed he loved me for who I was, not what I had. 5 years of marriage. All a lie. I clutched my purse tighter, feeling the envelope inside that would change everything. "Mrs. Tanaka," Judge Richardson addressed me directly. "Do you have any response to these claims?" I stood slowly, my heart pounding, but my resolve stronger than ever. "Your Honor, I believe there's something the court needs to see." Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs much earlier. Bradley had swept me off my feet during the most vulnerable time of my life. I'd just turned 40, running my consulting firm, Sakura Analytics, with modest success but little time for romance. My grandmother had been my closest companion until her death 3 years before I met Bradley. I was still grieving when he appeared at a business conference in Memphis. Charming, attentive, genuinely interested in my work helping small businesses optimize their operations. "You're brilliant," he'd say, watching me review financial reports. "I've never met anyone who understands numbers the way you do." At the time, I thought he was impressed by my intelligence. Now I realized he was calculating my net worth. Our courtship was a whirlwind of expensive dinners and romantic getaways. Bradley worked as a sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, but he always seemed to have money for lavish dates. "I believe in investing in the people I care about," he'd say when I questioned his spending. I was flattered, not realizing he was already planning his long-term investment strategy. When Bradley proposed after 8 months, I was hesitant. My grandmother had always warned me about men who move too fast. But Bradley was persistent. "Life's too short to wait. I know what I want, and I want you." His proposal was elaborate, a private dinner on a riverboat with a quartet playing our favorite songs. The ring was stunning, probably worth more than his annual salary. My attorney, Hana Nakamura, had insisted on a prenuptial agreement. Any successful businesswoman needs protection. It's not romantic, but it's practical. I felt awkward bringing it up with Bradley, worried he'd think I didn't trust him. But his reaction surprised me. He laughed and waved it off like it was nothing. "Of course, darling. Whatever makes you comfortable. I'm not marrying you for your money. I'm marrying you for you." He signed the papers without even reading them, joking that love doesn't need fine print. "It's just a romantic formality," he'd said, scribbling his signature with a flourish. Like promising to love, honor, and cherish, but with more legal jargon. I felt relieved that he was so understanding. Hannah had been thorough in crafting the agreement, protecting not just my existing assets, but any future inheritance or business growth. "Your grandmother's estate will eventually come to you," she'd reminded me. "This ensures it stays in your family where it belongs." At the time, I thought she was being overly cautious. Now I realized she'd been absolutely prescient. The real shock came 18 months into our marriage. The call about my grandmother's estate. She'd left me everything. Her house. Her investments. Her collection of rare books. And $2.8 million in carefully managed funds. Far more than I'd ever expected. The inheritance transformed my financial situation overnight. Bradley's reaction had been telling. His eyes literally lit up when I told him about the money. $2.8 million, he repeated like he couldn't believe it. Akira, we're rich. The way he said, we're, should have been my first clue. From that moment, Bradley's spending habits changed dramatically. He quit his job within 6 months, claiming he wanted to explore new opportunities and support my success. What he actually did was spend my money like his personal allowance. Luxury car for networking purposes. Invested in a friend's restaurant without consulting me. Lost $30,000 when the business failed. Expensive vacations. Exclusive golf club membership. Started dressing like he'd always been wealthy. Every time I questioned a purchase, he'd remind me that we're partners. That couples should trust each other with financial decisions. The breaking point came 6 months ago. I discovered Bradley had been telling people at the country club that the inheritance was family money belonging to both of us. He'd started introducing himself as an investor and entrepreneur, conveniently forgetting to mention all his investments were made with my grandmother's carefully preserved wealth. When I confronted him about the lies and spending, Bradley became defensive. Then cruel. You act like it's some big secret that I married up, he snapped. Everyone knows you needed someone like me to enjoy life. Before we met, you were just a lonely workaholic with no social life. His words cut deep because there was truth in them. I had been lonely. Bradley had brought excitement and companionship into my life. But I realized he'd been playing a long game, positioning himself as my savior while systematically planning to claim everything I'd inherited. The final straw? I found emails between Bradley and his attorney discussing divorce strategy. They'd been planning this for months, timing it to maximize his potential settlement. Bradley had researched Tennessee's divorce laws, looking for ways to claim his emotional support and lifestyle contributions entitled him to a larger share of my assets. That's when I contacted Hannah again and filed for divorce myself. I refused to let Bradley control the narrative or timeline. If he wanted to fight over my grandmother's money, I'd give him one. But it wouldn't go the way he expected. Now, standing in this courtroom, I was ready to show Bradley exactly what his greed had earned him. I reached into my purse and withdrew the manila envelope Hannah had prepared for this exact moment. The courtroom fell completely silent except for the soft rustle of paper and distant hum of air conditioning. Bradley's confident expression faltered as he watched me approach the judge's bench. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady and clear. I believe the court needs to review this document before proceeding with any asset division discussions. Judge Richardson extended her hand and accepted the envelope. What is the nature of this document, Mrs. Tanaka? It's a prenuptial agreement, Your Honor. One that my husband signed before our marriage 5 years ago. The change in atmosphere was immediate and electric. Bradley's attorney, Gerald Weston, shot up from his chair like he'd been stung. Your Honor, we were not made aware of any prenuptial agreement. This is highly irregular. Sit down, Mr. Weston, Judge Richardson commanded, already breaking the seal. I'll examine the documents and determine their validity. I returned to my seat, keeping my eyes focused on Bradley. His face went from confident to confused to something approaching panic in 30 seconds. He was whispering frantically to his attorney, gesturing toward the judge's bench. I could make out fragments. She never mentioned. How is this possible? Hannah remained perfectly calm beside me. She'd been preparing for this moment for months. Just watch, she whispered with a small smile. Judge Richardson was thorough, taking her time with each page. The document was comprehensive. Hannah had made sure of that 5 years ago. It outlined exactly which assets were protected, which debts would remain separate, and most importantly, how any future inheritance would be handled. This appears to be a properly executed prenuptial agreement, Judge Richardson announced after several minutes. Dated 6 weeks before your marriage, witnessed by 2 notaries, and signed by both parties. Bradley's attorney looked like he wanted to disappear. I realized Gerald Weston had filed this divorce case without doing basic due diligence. He'd assumed, just like Bradley, that the marriage was a straightforward asset grab. Your Honor, Bradley suddenly stood up, his voice cracking. I need to see that document. I don't remember signing anything like that. Mr. Crawford, please remain seated and allow your attorney to handle these proceedings. But Bradley was spiraling now. His carefully constructed confidence crumbling. Akira, what is this? You never told me this was some kind of legal trap. Mr. Crawford, Judge Richardson's voice cut through the courtroom like a whip. You will remain silent or I will hold you in contempt. Your attorney may request to review the document through proper channels. Gerald approached the bench with obvious reluctance. I watched him examine the prenuptial agreement, his face growing paler with each page. He returned to whisper urgently to Bradley, who was shaking his head in disbelief. The spectators were fully engaged now, sensing something dramatic unfolding. I could hear muffled conversations and reporters' pens scratching as they captured every detail of Bradley's public humiliation. Your Honor, Gerald finally addressed the court, his voice notably lacking earlier confidence. My client would like to request a brief recess to review these documents more thoroughly. Judge Richardson checked her watch. Mr. Weston, did you not conduct discovery regarding potential prenuptial agreements before filing your asset claims? The attorney's silence was answer enough. Bradley had been so confident he'd never even mentioned the possibility of a prenup to his lawyer. I'll give you 10 minutes to review the document, Judge Richardson declared. But I should warn you that this appears to be a legally binding agreement that significantly impacts your client's claims. During recess, I watched Bradley and his attorney huddled in intense conversation near the windows. Bradley's gestures becoming more animated and desperate as Gerald explained the prenuptial agreement's implications. Even from across the room, I could see the exact moment Bradley realized his plan had completely backfired. Hannah used the time to review her notes. He's going to claim fraud or duress, she predicted quietly. Men like Bradley always blame everyone else when their schemes fall apart. She was right. When court resumed, Gerald immediately launched into a desperate legal argument. Your Honor, my client believes he was deceived about this document's nature. Mrs. Tanaka presented it as a romantic formality, not a comprehensive asset protection agreement. Judge Richardson looked distinctly unimpressed. Mr. Weston, are you claiming your client signed a legal document without reading it? Your Honor, my client trusted his wife to be honest about the document's scope and implications. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Bradley had always prided himself on being shrewd. Someone who could read people and situations. Now his attorney was arguing he was too trusting and naive to understand a legal contract. The document is clearly labeled as a prenuptial agreement, Judge Richardson observed, flipping through pages. It includes standard warnings about seeking independent legal counsel. Did your client choose to waive that right? Gerald shuffled through papers nervously. Yes, Your Honor. My client waived his right to independent counsel. And the document was reviewed by a notary public with your client present, confirming his identity? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Richardson turned her attention directly to Bradley. Mr. Crawford, when you signed this document, did anyone force you to do so? Were you under any kind of duress or coercion? Bradley's face was red with embarrassment and anger. No, Your Honor, but I thought it was just paperwork. Akira made it sound like it didn't matter. Did you read the document before signing it? The question hung in the air like a sword. Bradley looked around the courtroom as if searching for an escape route. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable for everyone. Mr. Crawford, I asked you a direct question. I skimmed it, Bradley finally admitted. But Akira said it was just a formality. Judge Richardson's expression was a masterpiece of judicial disapproval. Mr. Crawford, you signed a legal document without reading it after waiving your right to legal counsel, and now you're asking this court to invalidate it because you didn't take it seriously? Complete silence. Even the reporters had stopped writing, mesmerized by Bradley's public humiliation. I felt a surge of satisfaction watching him squirm under the judge's scrutiny. Your Honor, Gerald made one final attempt. Perhaps we could argue that the agreement is unconscionable given the disparity in. Mr. Weston, Judge Richardson interrupted. Have you reviewed the financial disclosures included with this prenuptial agreement? Gerald flipped through the document again, clearly searching for something he'd missed. There are extensive financial disclosures here, Your Honor. Indeed there are. Mrs. Tanaka provided complete documentation of her assets, income, and expected inheritance. Your client signed acknowledgments confirming he reviewed and understood all financial information. This is one of the most thorough prenuptial agreements I've seen in my 23 years on the bench. Bradley looked like he was about to be sick. The golden boy who had charmed his way through life was finally facing consequences for his actions. Judge Richardson cleared her throat and began reading directly from the prenuptial agreement, her voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. Section 4, Paragraph A. All assets owned by either party prior to marriage shall remain the separate property of that party. Section 4, Paragraph B. Any inheritance received by either party during the marriage shall be considered separate property and shall not be subject to division upon divorce. Bradley's face went through a spectrum of colors, red to white to green. He gripped the table edge so hard his knuckles were white. That can't be legal, he muttered loud enough for several people to hear. Section 6, Judge Richardson continued, addresses spousal support. Quote, neither party shall be entitled to alimony or spousal support from the other, regardless of the length of the marriage or the disparity in income. This section was initialed by both parties and witnessed separately. Gerald was frantically taking notes, probably trying to find any possible loophole. But Hannah had been too thorough 5 years ago. Every potential challenge had been anticipated and addressed. Your Honor, I stood up. If I may address the court. Proceed, Mrs. Tanaka. When I inherited my grandmother's estate 18 months ago, I consulted with my attorney about whether the inheritance was protected under the prenuptial agreement. We confirmed it was fully covered under Section 4, Paragraph B. The inheritance has been kept in separate accounts and has never been commingled with marital assets. This was the final nail in Bradley's coffin. Not only was the prenup ironclad, but I'd been scrupulously careful about keeping the inheritance separate. Judge Richardson nodded approvingly. Mrs. Tanaka, did you use any portion of your inheritance for marital expenses or joint purchases? No, Your Honor. I maintained my regular income for household expenses. The inheritance has remained completely separate. Bradley exploded. That's not true. She bought things for us. She paid for vacations. Mr. Crawford, Judge Richardson's voice was ice cold. You are out of order. Sit down immediately. But Bradley was beyond reason now. His carefully constructed facade had completely crumbled. This is insane. I've been with her for 5 years. I supported her emotionally. I gave up my career. You quit your job to spend my money, I said quietly, unable to help myself. Mrs. Tanaka, Judge Richardson warned, but her tone was almost amused. Gerald was tugging on Bradley's jacket, trying to get him to sit down and stop making things worse. But Bradley was in full meltdown mode, his true nature finally showing through. She trapped me, Bradley shouted. She made me think we were partners. She let me believe that money was ours. Mr. Crawford, if you cannot control yourself, I will have the bailiff remove you from my courtroom. The threat of being physically removed finally penetrated Bradley's rage. He sat down heavily, chest heaving with angry breaths. But the damage was done. Everyone in the courtroom had seen his true character. The greedy, entitled man who had married me for my money and then had the audacity to act like a victim when his plan failed. Judge Richardson reviewed the final pages with deliberate care. The tension was palpable as everyone waited for her ruling. I felt calm satisfaction settling over me. After months of Bradley's manipulation and lies, the truth was finally coming to light. Based on my review of this prenuptial agreement, Judge Richardson announced, I am ready to render my decision on asset division. Judge Richardson removed her reading glasses and looked directly at Bradley with an expression that could have frozen fire. Mr. Crawford, this prenuptial agreement is valid, comprehensive, and legally binding. You are entitled to exactly nothing from your wife's premarital assets, inheritance, or business holdings. The words hit Bradley like physical blows. His mouth fell open. He stared at the judge in complete disbelief. Nothing, he whispered. Nothing, Judge Richardson confirmed. Furthermore, according to Section 7 of this agreement, all debts incurred individually by either party remain the responsibility of that party. Mrs. Tanaka, do you have documentation of debts incurred solely by your husband? Hannah handed me a thick folder which I passed to the bailiff. Yes, Your Honor. Credit card debts, the car loan, the failed restaurant investment, and country club fees totaling approximately $87,000. Bradley's attorney looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. The case he'd thought would net him a substantial fee had turned into complete disaster. Mr. Crawford, Judge Richardson continued, not only will you receive no assets from this marriage, but you remain personally responsible for $87,000 in debt that you accumulated during the marriage. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and whispers. I could hear someone behind me stifle a laugh. Bradley had gone from expecting millions to facing bankruptcy in 30 minutes. Your Honor, Bradley's voice was barely audible. This can't be right. 5 years of marriage has to count for something. Judge Richardson's smile was razor-sharp. It does count for something, Mr. Crawford. It counts as an expensive lesson in reading legal documents before signing them. The gavel came down with finality that echoed through the courtroom like thunder. The court grants the divorce petition filed by Mrs. Tanaka. No assets shall be transferred to Mr. Crawford. All individual debts remain with the party who incurred them. This court is adjourned. Bradley sat in stunned silence as reality sank in. He'd spent 5 years positioning himself for this moment, only to discover his plan had been doomed from the day he casually signed the prenuptial agreement without reading it. People began filing out, but I remained seated, watching Bradley's world collapse around him. Gerald was already packing his briefcase, clearly eager to escape this professional embarrassment. Several reporters approached me for comment, but Hannah intercepted them with practiced efficiency. Akira, Bradley called out as I finally stood to leave. We need to talk about this. This isn't over. I turned to face him one last time. Bradley, it was over the moment you decided to marry me for my money instead of loving me for who I am. The prenuptial agreement didn't ruin your plan. Your greed did. His face crumpled as the full weight of his situation hit him. No inheritance. No assets. Crushing debt that would follow him for years. The man who had charmed his way through life had finally met a situation that couldn't be smooth-talked or manipulated away. As I walked toward the courtroom doors with Hannah beside me, I felt lighter than I had in months. The nightmare was finally over, and Bradley's true nature had been exposed for everyone to see. Justice, it turned out, sometimes came with its own sense of poetic irony. Bradley's life unraveled completely in the months following our divorce. The $87,000 in debt forced him into bankruptcy within 6 months, destroying his credit and making it impossible to maintain his lifestyle. His reputation in Nashville's business community was ruined when word spread about how he tried to steal his wife's inheritance. He became a cautionary tale about prenuptial agreements and the dangers of marrying for money. The country club revoked his membership when he couldn't pay dues. The luxury car was repossessed, leaving him dependent on public transportation. His dating life became non-existent as women in our social circles learned about his gold-digging scheme, warning each other about the charming man who viewed marriage as a business transaction. He was forced to move in with his elderly parents in Memphis and take an entry-level sales job. His dreams of living off my grandmother's money replaced by the harsh reality of starting over at 47 with nothing but debt and a damaged reputation. I used a portion of my protected inheritance to establish the Tanaka Foundation, which provides legal assistance to women seeking prenuptial agreements and divorce representation, ensuring other women wouldn't fall victim to financial predators like Bradley. Looking back on my journey from trusting wife to empowered divorce survivor, I realized my grandmother's wisdom about protecting family wealth had saved me from more than just financial loss. It had saved me from a lifetime of being used by someone who saw my love as nothing more than a pathway to easy money.